Well, welcome to Shade Gardening, and I'm glad that you have all made it here online with us. And so I'll get started with the presentation. So I'm really excited to start things off with this question: what is shade? This term may have some uncertainty in your mind. I'll expand the definition for you. If you have uncertainty during this presentation and have a question, please use that chat feature and we'll get to your questions at the end of the presentation. So thanks so very much for being here. I'll also have my contact information at the end of the presentation if you need additional information or we don't get to your question. The definition of shade can be explained as a comparative darkness and coolness caused by shelter from direct sunlight. And there's various kinds of shade that we can look at. We have light shade, medium, full, heavy or dense shade. Light shade receives 3 to 4 hours of shade, some direct sun, but the shade can move throughout the day. Medium shade has 4 to 6 hours of shade, often in the morning or afternoon, and it's sometimes called dappled shade. Full shade, there's no direct sunlight. Heavy, dense shade, there's no direct sunlight, and usually the soil is dry. And on this slide, we can see some of the contrast of the various types of shade, and when you're looking at underneath trees, the canopy of trees, you're going to have more shade being provided. Some individuals consider shady sites to be a problem area in the landscape. However, shady sites do provide opportunities for home gardeners to utilize perennials that can be successful when growing in the shade. Light availability, how much light is available? Well, it's dependent upon our surroundings. We often find that we have heavy shade underneath evergreen trees, possibly by a deck or a porch. Full shade is found under leafed out trees or on the north side of buildings. So observe your light intensity around your home, and this dynamic of shade may change throughout the season or throughout the lifetime of your landscaping. As plants mature, they may be surrounded by other plants, and certainly trees do provide a lot of the shade in our landscape. So investigate your own yard for what kind of shade you have and how that can impact your planning for planting. There are some selection factors to look at. Plants have preferred cultural requirements. This could be light intensity, soil conditions, moisture requirements, and the amount of shade that the plant will do best in. So we find that most plants prefer a loose, highly organic soil with good drainage. Shade can not only affect the light intensity, but the temperature is usually cooler in these shady areas. So you want to water in the mornings to allow that foliage to dry off and to prevent diseases. A soil test could be utilized to determine the pH and the nutrient levels. And so you don't want to over fertilize your shade plants, and you want to provide the best cultural environment for your shade plants to be happy. Astilbes are one of the favorites of the shade garden. Astilbes are herbaceous, rhizotomous, long-lived perennials. Many of these have been selected with these thousands of flowers arranged in the plume-like panicles on top of these plants. They do add a nice accent of color. They tend to do well in planted in wet sites. These long-lasting panicles can turn brown and be left for some winter interest in the garden. You can divide these plants in the spring or fall, and these do prefer the moist and fertile soil. The Canadian ginger, it's a good ground cover. It creeps and forms some large colonies with these heart-shaped leaves that form a carpet. It stands up well with the cold or heat and can even be drought tolerant. The interesting spring blooming maroon flowers are hidden at the ground level. There is a counterpart to this, the European ginger, and it has smaller leaves and slowly forms clumps. So both of these ground covers can provide an interesting texture to the shady landscape. A barren strawberry, a broadleaf evergreen, it also forms a ground cover. This colonizer continues to spread, but it's not as aggressive as some of the other ground covers that we'll talk about later. It does have a beautiful yellow flower. It blooms heaviest in the mid-spring. It prefers that woodland shade garden with a moist, humus-rich soil. Usually we see a pH of about 5 to 6. It does tolerate full sun, but is accustomed to that dappled shade. Not very many pests for this plant. It's usually pest and disease free. A very popular plant, the false forget-me-not or the Brunnera. This has had a lot of recent additions as far as cultivars go. It's an herbaceous perennial that forms clumps. It can make an excellent ground cover for some shady areas. It tolerates the part shade, but it doesn't perform well in deep shade or full sun. This particular photo is of Jack Frost with its silver patina and green venations. These blooms rise above these plants about 18 inches on these stems, and so it does add some color. So while it doesn't accommodate itself to dry soils, it can tolerate a little bit of dryness, but you want to provide plenty of water and make sure that moisture is plentiful and constant for these to do their best. In northern Illinois, this will probably provide some better examples of Brunnera because it really doesn't tolerate the heat. These plants can self-sow and they could be divided infrequently as the clumps can die out in the center of the plant. Bowman's root is a perennial flowering plant from the rose family. It enjoys partial sun to full sun. Dry to moist conditions with a rocky soil. We see these blooms of 5-petaled white flowers on these wiry red stems, and this occurs from late spring to early summer. The typical of these plants is that you don't want to have them dry out completely. And they're wonderful to use in a mass planting, but you'll want to be sure to provide some shade during the hottest part of the day. Monkshood, these are found in well-drained soils in forest or natural areas. The monkshood is a poisonous plant with all the parts being poisonous when ingested. So wearing gloves would be advisable when handling this plant. These species are reliably hardy in zones 3 through 6, and it can add to the blue color in a shade garden with these very attractive blue flowers that appear in the summertime. The yellow barrenwort is another great addition for a dry soil application. It really is an underused perennial. They are clump forming rhizomatous, evergreen ground cover. It stays attractive all year long. The foliage appears yellow appears yellow flowers in the spring, and then the foliage has a bronze tint in the spring, but then it turns green throughout the summer. Hardy to zones 3 through 4, and this plant is great for a shady border or along a walkway. The yellow wax bells, a part shade to full shade. This does create a dramatic backdrop of foliage for some of your other plants. Hardy to zone 5 with some protection. In the late season, if it doesn't get affected by a frost, the leaves can turn a golden color, and it makes a great companion plant to hostas, ferns, and astilbe in the moist woodland border. They are found to be deer resistant as well with these palmate leaves. A creeping phlox performs best in full sun to part shade. It should be kept moist for the first part of the year, especially during hot, dry conditions, but it can be very drought tolerant. You can use it as a mass planting to help with erosion control. And again, it is deer and rabbit tolerant. Goat's beard is a plant that's going to require very moist soils, and it does tolerate the shade. In dry summers, you will want to provide some supplemental watering. It got its name from the appearance of the flowers that look like the beard of a goat, and they can get from 3 to 6 feet tall, generally used as a background or a specimen plant. What a popular plant for the shade, the hosta. There's thousands of cultivars that have been developed for various reasons, whether it be the leaf color, leaf shape, the size or texture of the leaves. They also have flowers that sometimes get forgotten. They're one of the easiest to grow for the shade and offer a lot of diversity. They can fit just about anywhere and require little maintenance other than cleaning them up after the season is over. So hostas do perform the best in rich soil, and they can definitely brighten up your shade area. Here's an example of hosta, the sum and substance. These have immense leathery leaves that tend to be a little bit more resistant to slug damage. They do start as chartreuse and then become yellow or gold as the summer approaches. And it was the hosta of the year in 2004. Inniswood Hosta is one of the most spectacular hostas. It has these 4 foot wide clumps that are topped with medium lavender flowers. The hummingbird is attracted to the flowers. It was a sport of the hosta sunglow, and so started from Inniswood Gardens in Ohio. Lungwort, it's under 12 inches high. They are tolerant to the dry shade. They prefer the rich soil. They typically got their name from the historical aspect of treating lung ailments. Because of these spotted leaves, they resemble the lung, and so they got both their scientific name and common name from this appearance. The hellebore, these flowers emerge in the spring. The old foliage can be trimmed off and replaced with fresh new growth. And they are very early bloomers in the spring and can be effective for a few months in the garden. They are nice to partner with the lungwort and other plants with similar cultural tolerances. A fragrant Solomon seal. Once you have it, you may have it for a while. It is nice in the landscape as a herbaceous perennial. It's shade-loving characteristics. They typically bloom from April to June. They do attract bees and butterflies. The plant is deer and rabbit resistant, and it does tolerate the heavy shade. Does make for a nice understory plant and a little bit of a ground cover. One of our wildflowers, the Virginia bluebells. It's one of the most beautiful wildflowers with these blue tubular flowers. They are typically found in those moist woodland sites, again, blooming in the early spring. The flowers tend to be born in nodding clusters, and they may disappear from the landscape. So be aware of that you may have to have some other plant to fill in where they have gone their way. The woodland phlox, These are nice for the organic soil. You want to keep them mulched so that they can serve moisture and keep those roots cool. You can cut back the stems after flowering to help combat some of your mildew problems. The rabbits may eat the foliage, but this is a good plant for using in a rock garden or a border, some of your native plant gardens or naturalized areas. Black cohosh is another perennial native to North America. It prefers moisture retentive soils, maybe a bit slow to get established, but it does have these fluffy looking creamy white flowers. The plant does add an aspect of vertical accent to the back of the border, and you can use this in a shady cottage garden or a woodland setting. The flowers do appear from May to August. The red baneberry. This is another toxic plant. The roots and berries are the most poisonous, hence the common name of baneberry. The poison doesn't affect the birds who are able to eat those berries, but this native species is a good addition to the shady border or woodland garden. It does have the attractive foliage that uh, accents the pretty flowers. A yellow fumitory, short-lived perennial. It spreads by seed, so it's not necessary to buy many plants, and you can easily cull out the seedlings. It does well in the deepest part of the shade and can be a nice filler plant in between heavier textured shade perennials. It is also toxic to horses. The maidenhair fern, one for heavy shade. It can grow in average, medium, well-drained soil. Part to full shade. It spreads by creeping rhizomes and can form large colonies over time, and it can tolerate a mild drought. The bugleweed is a plant that does have an aggressive tendency. You'll want to provide a border that it won't escape. It can encroach into your lawn, but there are many cultivars of this that have been developed, can be utilized from shady areas to the sun, and very tolerant to poor soils. The wild columbine is a native plant that may grow 3 feet to about a foot and a half wide. These red and yellow flowers mature in the early spring and can last about a month. They are attractive to hummingbirds, butterflies, and bumblebees. But once those flowers are gone, the plant can make an attractive ground cover. A jack in the pulpit. These are rarely browsed by mammals, but they do provide some food for the birds. They are part shade to full shade and have just an interesting flower stalk. Oh, a nice Japanese painted fern. It has light to dense shade, nice foliage, and a nice texture to that foliage that you can incorporate into the landscape again for those shady areas. The turtle head, you find this in moist sites along streams, ponds, or bogs. Maybe incorporated into your rain garden. Takes full sun to dappled sun. It attracts bees and hummingbirds. That is available commercially, but you will probably get the hybrid. So be sure to look for the species if that's what you're looking for. Coral bells. It does change color throughout the growing season. Most coral bells perform well in part sun to full sun with adequate moisture, and I see that a lot in the context of shade gardening. is that if it's going to be exposed to the full sun, it's going to need more moisture provided. So you definitely want to have that ample moisture, and you can also plant this with other plants and have a nice looking landscape. Winter heaving can be a bit of a problem of these plants being shifted, and so it may weaken or kill the plant over time. Sweet woodruff, known for its common name because of its fragrance, a mat-forming perennial. These leaves are also smell whenever they're crushed. They have these showy white flowers that are very fragrant, and so they have a sweet, nutty vanilla flavor. It is useful in the herb garden, also the rock garden, naturalized areas, the shady border. You can utilize it as a ground cover or an edging plant. Nice for places where you're going to be and be able to smell the aroma of the sweet woodruff. The dwarf crested iris. This is a short dwarf iris that has been utilized as a ground cover in places. It can tolerate the full sun, but it needs, again, some added moisture. Also good for the rock garden or woodland sites, or incorporated into your perennial border. It is also resistant to damage by deer. The yellow archangel, you will find that some plants can be aggressive, and this could be one of those plants that has an aggressive tendency. It forms a loose mat of foliage, but it spreads indefinitely. And so you need to be aware when shopping for perennials on their aggressive tendencies. This one can tolerate full but to part shade, and again, it can aggressively spread in the landscape. Anemone, these prefer the part shade. There's each flower features the showy petal-like white sepals and the contrasting yellow center stamens, as we see in the photo. This is also noted as windflower because of that upright flower being blown in a gentle breeze. A lily of the valley, it also can have aggressive behavior, part shade to full shade. It's not recommended for use because of that aggressive invasive tendency. The balloon flower doesn't have any serious problems, sun to part shade, nice with these flowers. It gives a nice blue accent. It can benefit from being pinched, and the spent flowers will remain for some time on the plant. Sweet Kate golden spiderwort. There's various species of spiderwort, but they are grown for their showy flowers and attractive foliage, and one that really can have a lot of distinction in the landscape. Cutting back those plants to almost to the ground will promote new foliage and possibly another bloom in the summer or fall. Here is Husker Red Penstemon. So this features these tulip tubular flowers. It does have a decorative nature with the foliage. The flowers bloom from mid-spring to early summer. And when those leaves emerge in the spring, they do have a deep maroon coloration, but they turn dark green during the summer. It was also the Perennial Plant Association Plant of the Year in 1996. So there's no serious insect or disease problems, but root rot could occur in overly wet soils. And there's another cultivar of this called Pocahontas, and it has, again, that reddish maroon foliage. Shrubby St. John's wort, sun to part shade. There's not a problem with mammals feeding on this. It is attractive with the leaves and the flowers, has a high pollinator value, and a nice shrubby plant for your landscape with those yellow flowers in June. Bloodroot, these flower in the early spring. As the plant emerges, the leaves are tightly coiled around the flower stalk. It produces a single white flower, and these individual flowers only last for a short time. It will spread over time, and the plant gets its name bloodroot from those tubular roots that produce a dark red liquid when cut. The foam flower, it's a nice wiry kind of stem that holds these white flowers, usually 5 petals and 10 stamens. The leaves may have a reddish variegation along the veins. Just a nice plant with its airy appearance. A lady's mantle. This particular plant, it does prefer the moist soil. The plant matures at about 12 inches high to 18 inches in width, can be grown in full sun or partial shade, and there's various cultivars available. Japanese Hakon grass. This is hardy in zones 5 through 9. The plant foliage will burn in full sun locations and lose some of its color intensity, particularly on the variegated cultivars. So you'll want to mulch this in the winter, trim that foliage to the ground in the late winter to early spring before the new shoots emerge. It does have a slow rate of spread, so it's just a nice ornamental with being a grass. With our grasses, we also have some sedges. Pennsylvania sedge, it's part shade to full shade. It is capable of spreading by rhizomes. It may also self-seed. It does form a sod. So it's best to plant these possibly by plugs and not by seed. May have a better success rate there. It won't be a good substitute for a lawn because it doesn't achieve the same resistance to foot traffic as what a regular turf would. But it is a great underplanting for some taller perennials. The Goldie's wood fern, part shade to full shade. In general, most of our ferns are pretty well behaved in the shade. They can get to a large size and also have a spreading tendency to just fill in spaces where you're looking to not just have an expanse of mulch, but you know, shade areas you probably have less competition with some of the weeds, and so it's just nice to have some variation to your texture, and ferns certainly do provide some additional texture to your shade garden. Here we have the Britt Marie Crawford, or the big-leafed goldenray. Another clump-forming herbaceous perennial. It's showy rounded clumps, or glossy leaves, usually are purple, uh, black leaves that have a daisy-like orange-yellow flower. You never want to have the soils completely dry out and provide that moisture to your big-leaved goldenray. The bleeding heart, Dicentra species. It's gone back and forth on its scientific name, but this is Alba. And so these white flowers come true from seed. They do have that distinctive heart-shaped flower. The cultivar seems to tolerate the summer heat better than the normal pink type, but it's not as vigorous as a plant. These particular plants are great for cottage gardens, wildflower gardens, or a shady spot in your landscape. Works pretty good in the shady border. A few pests are possibly an aphid on the inflorescences. The gold heart, common bleeding heart. This has the golden foliage. The leaves may aggravate some skin allergies, but it does grow in fertile, well-drained, slightly alkaline soil, partial to full shade. You can allow it to self-sow, but cut back after the foliage yellows and withers away. Slugs and snails can attack new foliage, and powdery mildew could also be a problem. If you have the need to watch this recording or other recordings that will be posted here on our horticulture YouTube channel, and you can access that through this URL, go.illinois.edu/4seasonsrecordings. And we'll open it up for questions. If you have a mobile device, you can scan this QR code, or after the program, the short link, go.illinois.edu/shade gardening. And here's my contact information. If you have questions that don't get addressed, it's aholsing@illinois.edu.